Good evening and welcome to Economics Unbound. Well, tonight we focus on what skills our education system would need to produce and to ensure that citizens and young people are able to navigate the post-COVID economy. Now, if you are sitting at home and you're listening to us, we will attempt to engage you on the issue of which skill set would put you in the pound seat in terms of negotiating the post-COVID economy successfully. We will also ask our guests whether the South African education system is poised or not to create the kind of skills needed by the economy of the future.
Tandeka, we are asking this question at a critical time. Today, the first troop of matriculants of the year 2020 sat for the first examination of the year. It has been a difficult year for education, as the COVID-19 pandemic has affected educational systems worldwide, leading to the near-total closure of schools, universities, and colleges. Most governments around the world have temporarily closed educational institutions in an attempt to reduce the spread of COVID-19. According to UNICEF, this affected over 1 billion learners worldwide, and UNICEF says that 72 countries implemented national school closures around the world at different points in their response to the global pandemic.
Now, the abrupt move from the classroom to remote online learning at the outbreak of the corona pandemic interrupted learning for children in low-income areas and families in particular, and that happened around the world. Now, those families that lacked the financial means to afford computers and Wi-Fi internet access were immediately and enormously disadvantaged. And parents who lacked the educational skills and the capacity to take on the role of teacher had a real disadvantage, and their children were, as a consequence, severely and tragically affected. This has led to many NGOs across the globe sounding the cry for free broadband as a public good. But tonight we focus on the new skills, 5 of them to be precise, that will help you negotiate the new post-COVID economy.
Okay, Tandeka, let us begin to count the needed critical skills of the post-COVID economy. Let me go first. Number 1 is digital literacy. Digital skills are critically important now, and the pandemic has clearly shown this. The ability to code artificial intelligence, to program robots to do things that we as humans cannot do, so robots cannot contract the human viruses and can be deployed to perform functions that would be normally performed by people. This week, for example, Eskom deployed drones to monitor electricity consumption and monitor meters. So skills such as programming and coding are key. So if you were thinking of taking that coding and programming course, do fill out those forms, and fast. The Education Department had begun introducing robotics and coding on a selective basis, but we will ask them how they plan to provide these programs.
The second skill is learning and development. Are you confused? Please don't be. This skill refers to the ability to continuously learn new skills, to continue to be relevant in a fast evolving and changing context. This means acquiring the mental discipline and frame of mind to continuously embark on a mission of personal development or a quest for never-ending improvement, what the Japanese call Kaizen. With technological advancements happening at a rapid pace, programs and learning that is required and that was acquired at universities just 5 years ago is fast becoming obsolete or irrelevant. And unless one has built upon the evolutions in learning and technology in one's own discipline, one can easily be relegated to the margins of the discipline that you have studied for and worked hard for many years. This means that the ability to read expansively and intensely and to steep oneself, literally steep oneself in a new area of knowledge is crucial and key to navigating the unfolding economy.
Thandeka, can innovation be taught? Can the ability to solve problems through a combination of disciplines like medicine, mathematics, etc. be learned? And how? I have learned that in simple words, innovation is the thought process which allows you to come up with fresh solutions to pressing social, institutional, organizational, scientific, and other problems. Oftentimes, people confuse innovation with creativity, and the two words are sometimes even used interchangeably. But it is a mistake. Despite what people think, creativity and innovation are not the same thing. Creativity is an ability each person is born with. It is the creative thinking which assists a person to come up with fresh and brilliant ideas. Innovation, on the other hand, is the process of bringing these ideas to life. Innovation is the core trait of entrepreneurs, and the post-COVID economy is in need of more entrepreneurs. This skill can be learned.
The fourth critical post-COVID skill is data literacy, the ability to read, understand, and map trends, understand voluminous amounts of data, and lend meaning to them. And data often comes in bundles of tables and other formats. Then these become critical skills to comprehend and to acquire.
Data is a critical asset for every company. I have read and learned that with the right data, companies are able to better predict the impact of future business disruptions and are better able to serve customers with the right products and services during or after any pandemic. Companies that understand business trends and shifting customer needs are better able to respond in the right way should a future pandemic come along. However, the data is useless to a company unless there is data literacy, people equipped with the right skills to understand the data and make better decisions because of it. Professionals with data literacy will even be more appealing to prospective employers than ever before.
Now, I have a colleague, her name is Matric, and she goes around listening to teachers, parents, and students and bringing us to an understanding of where the education system is going in this country. Now, let's listen to more on this and critical skills from my colleague, Matric. Well, we apologize for the technical glitch on the audio on that clip. Let's take a short break. Now, welcome back. I am now joined by the SABC's education reporter, Matric, and also on Skype by Ashley Phillips from EduPower. Matric, welcome.
Thank you so much.
You've been out there. How's the day looking in the schools?
Well, so far not so much of, well, it's eventful in the sense that I suppose the largest cohort of learners began. I think one of the larger papers in terms of English, paper 1, and also that we haven't really heard any, your cheating or leaking question papers so far. We haven't heard of any, perhaps your copying scandals, but it seems like everything, to us, all systems go this morning. For a lot of schools across the country, nerves for both parents and learners. But I think also what came out that was very important today was that announcement. Actually, it came last night that the Department of Education having gone into this partnership with the Department of Health to allow the learners that have test positive for COVID to be able to sit. You'll remember this was some sort of grey area, just because nobody knew what was going to happen to the students. At one point, it was said that they could only write in June again, which would be that version of your supplementary exams. So I suppose a lot of grateful parents and a lot of grateful children to know that they are then able to complete the academic year this becoming a bit of a challenge for unions feeling that it's not safe to have their members on the premises while this happens. So it's supposed it's a catch-22 situation in that particular sector.
Now, even if our schools are not producing the desirable future skills, it's very important to the economy that this matric year is completed successfully. Now, you sat down with Minister Angie Motsoga a while ago, and you talked about the whole issue of critical skills. And I watched an amazing package that you prepared, but unfortunately we couldn't hear the audio on it a minute ago. And you said in the package that there is evidence that there are fewer students enrolling for mathematics and fewer for science and other subjects that are critical to the new economy.
Yes, you'd know, I think they call them gateway subjects, if you may.
Yes.
This is your maths, your science, your accounting, and a bit of economics. But because these three are sort of interlinked,
Yes.
your mathematics is paired with science most of the time, your physical science. It's also paired, I suppose, with accounting as
yes.
well. And these are subjects that it would seem that are not really appetizing for our
Why
grade.
is that? And is it a new phenomenon? And what did the minister tell you about this?
When we spoke initially in the beginning of the year, she had said that the needle had seemed not to be moving. I posed the question to her again this morning, and I said, what has changed? We have a new class because they had tried to get programs. She was crying that they are bleeding. They have a small pool of learners, especially with mathematics, because I suppose this is the foundation for you to be able to take the other subjects and pay them meaningfully, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
She had said that there seems learners don't really have much of an appetite. But also, Tandega, even if you look at the distinction pool for these subjects, I think last year, if memory serves me correctly, both for mathematics, both for physical science and the accounting subjects, they set just under 7,000 distinctions. I mean, this is hundreds of thousands of learners that write these subjects. To get such a small pool of distinctions shows that there seems to be a problem within that foundation phase building up to the subjects.
Now being a mom myself and very interested in education, I understand that with maths, how you acquire a love of mathematics and problem solving and the skill set that it will lead to success with mathematics, it has to start very early, almost with ECD or early basic education before you can love it enough to take it for matric.
Yeah, it would seem like that. I mean, when you just talk to some students, for them, it seems like understanding is the issue. I suppose maybe the gap that we find, you're quite correct, I suppose, it's that transfer between educator and learner to base that foundation. And I think perhaps that's where it may go wrong, is in those critical grades, because you see the learners coming up with it up until grade 9, and I think you would see the reintroduction of maths literacy, I think, to try and accommodate this children. But even then, you see them as the years just dropping like that. I know that we also spoke to MEC Lisufi as well in the beginning of the year about that, also saying he had great concerns for these subjects. He could see them drop off. But let me just, I think, by wrapping it up, just give today's answer that the minister told us, because she didn't in so many words tell us that it seems like the numbers haven't really done that much in terms of increasing, saying that once you lose them at grade 10, they will only really be able to tell, I suppose, next year if they've managed to have success in the programs that they have put in place to ensure that these subjects are appealing to learners. But I think also just the building blocks seem to be what's missing.
Yeah, the early years are critical. They say that the Jesuits were the old educators in the Catholic Church, used to say, give me the first 7 years and I will give you, probably they would say, give you a Jesuit. But let's bring in Ashley now. Ashley, who's joining us from EduPower. What do you think of those early building years and how they then help us develop an appetite for those gateway subjects, which can then lead us into acquiring a critical mass of the kind of skills that our economy needs, bearing in mind that there is a positive correlation between having a highly educated population and GDP growth. What are your views, Ashley?
I definitely do believe that we need to upskill the children from a young age. So I do believe from primary school and throughout their high school life that they do need to have some kind of science and maths with them throughout so that they may be able to succeed later when they want to go to tertiary or in the work environment. But also, if we can upskill our students today and let them know how important it is to have these skills, they'll always want to be successful and to make sure that they do their best in school, because we would have emphasized the importance of this in their early developing years.
Now, I imagine that young people consider skills like coding and programming and playing around with exciting things like artificial intelligence. They consider it cool and they consider it exciting, but they're not loving the maths that much. What can we do, and what does your organization help us to do in acquiring the new skills that this new economy will need?
So just like how you said there, the students or the younger ones like to have coding and it's fun for them and they like technology and they're excited to play their games and to be on cell phones and on the internet. If we can somehow incorporate the mathematics as well as the science parts into those kind of activities that they do enjoy, I'm sure it will stick with them and they'll want to actually learn more about it, especially if it's in a fun way that's more memorable for them, especially in earlier years. So basically in my environment, everything is work experience and we do everything practically. So it's easier for us to remember and to have these skills with us because we do it every single day in our workplace and it's fun. We do so many new things, we learn so many new things, and then when we leave EduPower, then we are able to take those skills with us and continue on.
That's amazing. Now, the last word goes to you, Mahlaku. It seems to me that when it comes to technology, the old teachers lag behind the children. So it's a case of the tail wagging the dog here, and it's often the children teaching the ill-prepared teachers.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that it's not that South African children are not capable of developing a love, but I think we go back again to foundation and how do we best equip South African children to be able to not only see the gadget but to understand how it came together, because you know that's also part of technology, be also being able to engineer your computers and so forth, not
Indeed.
to just only be able to use them but to know what goes into it, and I think that's quite critical. But I think we wait and we see. But I think it was so concerning when you looked at the table that we did in that package. You'll see that in Limpopo, the prelims results indicated that only 29% of children having passed mathematics there. I think that is, if that's anything to go by, we really have a lot to be worried about from this cohort of 2020, but we can only hope for the best.
Mahlaku, I wish you all the best in your coverage of education issues. Please give me a presidential bump as we begin to listen to that package that Mahlaku is speaking about concerning critical skills subjects.
Despite a record pass for the class of 2019, maths, physical science and accounting stats were showing that learners were shying away from these critical subjects. According to Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga, the bleeding numbers were a cause for concern.
We picked up, for instance, one of our biggest crises around accounting. We have less students who, year after year, take accounting as a subject. And because we had linked accounting to maths, then we find that most learners were losing learners in accounting. In maths, we have introduced maths, technical maths. Yes. So we're losing some of the kids who are going to be doing maths for kids who are going to be doing technical subjects or going to go into engineering. They're opting for technical maths. So, and that's the other shift. So whilst we are supposed to be, or we wish to increase the numbers from the bottom to make sure that half of our learners take maths, we really, the needle seems not to be moving.
And it would seem that learners have yet to develop a stomach for number crunching and equations. In Limpopo, 2019 showed that more than 34,000 learners sat for mathematics. However, only 53.1% managed to pass the subject. This year, the province had more candidates registered to write mathematics, with prelim results showing that only 29.3% of learners registered a pass. In Mpumalanga, mathematic enrollments have grown with just over 3,000 more than the previous year. Enrollments in physical science have also improved. More candidates will write that subject this year. With only 31 schools attaining 100% pass rate in the province says it hopes that the systems it has put in place will yield results. Gauteng's class of 2020 enrollments have not shown much difference since last year. The province has marked a small increase in learners taking up mathematics and physical science in Matric. However, maths literacy proved to be more of a popular choice. While the various provinces crunch the numbers and hope for a successful exam season,
if you're not taking your academics into consideration,
some youth of Johannesburg's Ivory Park have taken it upon themselves to offer free tutoring for matrics in the area.
I think there is a need, considering the informal settlements in Ivory Park, where we live and where we grew up, there is a need for extra lessons.
For matriculants attending these sessions, a nail-biting last-minute wait before exams begin.
I had dropped in many of my subjects, specifically physical sciences, and but with the support that you're getting from the district and also the motivations that you get from our teachers, like it really keeps me going.
The hard thing is maths, pure maths, but I can manage now because I had support.
Grade 12 learners will begin exams with English Paper 1 on Thursday. Matlako Komani, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, all the best to the Matric class of 2020, and thank you to Matlako Komani. Let's take a short break. Now, even when school closures are temporary, they lead to and they carry high social and economic costs. The disruptions that they cause affect people across communities, but their impact is more severe for disadvantaged children and their families, including interrupted learning, compromised nutrition, childcare problems, and consequent economic costs to families who cannot work. Now, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, which studies school performance, and they say that performance hinges critically on maintaining close relationships with the school and with the teachers. The Department of Higher Education prepares and it publishes a critical skills list, and it puts it out there for everybody to read. And this is what Prudence Makubalo, our producer, has prepared for us. Now, please listen in.
There is an increasing consensus globally that if provision of education and training is to be better coordinated with the needs of society and the economy, central information about skills needs is required. In South Africa, the accurate identification of current and future occupational demand is imperative in order to ensure the national goals of the National Development Plan, the New Growth Path, and the Industrial Policy Action Plan are achieved. Information about occupations in high demand provides useful insights into the skills needs of the economy and society, especially in a context where the South African labour market is characterized by high levels of unemployment and skills shortages. The primary purpose of the national list of occupations in high demand is to improve the responsiveness of post-school education and training systems to the needs of the economy and the broader development objectives of the country. More specifically, this list has been compiled to support planning processes is the PSET system, particularly in the relation to enrollment planning, decision-making on prioritization of resources allocations, qualifications development, and career information and advice. In addition, public and private employers, employer organization and professional bodies, trade unions and research organization are encouraged to use the list of occupations in high demand to support provisioning of their own education and training programs. Numerous reports have cited the challenges of skills shortages in the country as bottlenecks in both the production goods and the provisioning of services within both the public and private sectors. For the government and the post-school education and training system to respond effectively to the skills needs, and secondly, to adopt specific intervention that will respond to the skills challenges facing the country. So according to the Labour Market Intelligence, the supply of the demand for skills in South Africa aims in informing future skills policy and supporting an economic growth path. Through careful analysis, reports were made as attempts to understand the difficulties and details surrounding how supply and demand interact and the responding implications for reform. Key recommendations from the analysis of skills and supply demand is firstly to integrate skills development and economic growth policies and to improve coordination between different government departments. Improve the overall skills development of the population, and lastly, it's to support the acquisition of skills required for in-demand occupations.
Well, thank you, Prudence, for telling us what the Department of Higher Education says about critical skills and the economy. On Skype, I am joined by the University of Johannesburg's Vice-Chancellor and Principal, Professor Chilidzi Marwala. And from the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, we are joined also by Dr. Remy Shawa. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Thandeka, for the invitation.
Good
evening, Thandeka.
Dr. Chilidzi Marwala, you have been following this discussion. You're an educator and you are a man who's very passionate about the transition of this country to the fourth industrial revolution. Can you please tell us about what we can do about being a laggard in the world in terms of developing critical skills, especially now that these skills are more critical given the post-COVID economy?
Yeah, I think firstly, one thing that we really should not rule out is for our students to have a very good foundation. So if we are going to develop these skills, we have to start early. I'm reminded of a book that was written by Masaru Ibuka, one of the two founders of the electronics company Sony, when he said 3 years is too late to impart some of these skills.
You mean 3 years of age?
That we fix.
Professor, you mean 3 years of age is too late?
Yeah, that was Masaru Ibuka.
What do you believe? At what age should we begin?
I actually think certain mathematical skills, you need to impart them before that age, you know. The ability to visualize, the ability to see things in 3 dimensions.
So this means that parents must step in and that we must also improve early basic education, which is currently sitting with social development. Do you think maybe if it came in under basic education, we would be able to treat it more seriously pedagogically? We could involve parents even more readily because we could teach children to see blocks and to count and to visually see the symbols of numbers from a very, very early age.
Absolutely, but I also have to also put it forward that at that age, 2 years of age, very few kids actually go to school, you know. So the strengthening of families so that they can be able to do some of the essential things that ought to be done is very, very important. Where it should be located, I don't think that is really what matters. What matters is how do you capacitate the department so that they are able to do what is expected of them to do. Because, for example, we have problems in our basic education sector, you know.
Yes.
Too many people are dropping out before they reach matric. And when they reach matric, they are not passing some of the critical subjects that we require for our economy to actually benefit from, you know.
And from
so
that
again,
package, we can see that they're not even taking up these critical subjects for our economy to benefit.
No, absolutely. And of course, there are other challenges that if you go to some of our villages, those high schools simply do not have good teachers to teach those subjects, you know. And I'm not even talking about the labs that you require in order to be able to teach those subjects. Just the basics. What the study that has been done, especially in the teaching of mathematics and science, found that at the high school level, the content is actually very challenging for the teachers, you know. In fact, there was a study that was done that was saying that quite an unacceptable, well, if teachers cannot be able to pass the exam, the mock exam of the course they are teaching, then you have a problem. You know,
Good Lord.
The fact that a study found that quite a substantial number of teachers were not able to pass matric mathematics while they were teaching that subject is actually a cause of concern. So how do we augment the teaching of that subject in our schooling system?
We are, as a country, doing fairly badly on mathematics outcomes. But let me bring in the United Nations and Remy. Remy, can you join us at this point, and can we talk about what the view of us looks like from where you are seated as the United Nations?
Thank you so much, Thandeka. I mean, I agree a lot with what Professor is saying. I think there's a need for us to look at how do we invest in young people and children at an early age so that we prepare them for going ahead into the post-COVID world. And obviously, you know, the demand is changing because of the pandemic, the skills that are needed more. If at all schools we're looking at digitizing education and planning to do it in 10 years, because of COVID, that now has to be sped up. So we're looking at adapting to the current trends, but also trying to see what comes ahead.
It's going to be interesting.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I was just following up on what you were saying and thinking that it would be interesting to see what policy matrix we decide to adopt and how we will digitize in a sea of poverty, because poverty has been the constraint to many students accessing a digital education during the COVID-19 period. And how are we going to bridge that divide policy-wise, and practically how are we going to bridge that divide? Also, Professor Marwala was saying that our society and our families would need to be stronger, and our society is more cohesive and less poor for us to be able to help young, very young children acquire maths and literacy skills at an early age.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that, you know, COVID-19 has given us that opportunity right now, because we have had no option but to adapt and to try and look at innovation, to try and look at the gaps that exist in access to technology, access to data, to internet. And I think that, you know, there's some obviously good practices that we can build on. So for instance, we have the Global Coalition on Education that was put together by different governments and UN partners, as well as the private sector. And what this coalition did was to look to the private sector and identify some of the tools and resources that can be provided to learners, especially in less developed countries, to be able to access, learning and teaching online. So we saw that that worked because we had a crisis, and so there's a stage that has already been set, looking at private and public partnerships. In terms of parental engagement, I think that it's more important now more than ever that parents take interest in what the children are interested in and what they want to do and what they're doing at school, so that they begin to expose them to some kind of education, even in the home, that will create that curiosity, to create an environment for them to be able to approach different problem-solving contexts as well as innovation.
Indeed. Professor Marwala, can I bring you back for the last bit here? There is a huge problem with access to data and to broadband. Have you been part of the discussions about this becoming a public good so that we can accelerate the adoption of critical skills in our country?
Absolutely. As you know, I was the deputy chair of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and we have a recommendation that specifically addresses that point. So I think, what ought to be done is not just the availability of data. It is also to make sure that our key infrastructure is available. Because, for example, now that our students were home during COVID, as a university, we went and bought data for all our students.
Yes.
And it cost us 6 million rands.
6 million.
Then we realized that, just because you have data does not necessarily mean that you are going to be connected. The infrastructure where you live must actually be good. And I'm not even talking about your own computer. I'm talking about the infrastructure that is supplied by telecommunication companies. So what we need to do is we need to create an environment where our telecommunication companies can be able to invest in the latest technology. And one of the things that we need to sort out is that many of our telecommunication companies are forced to support devices from 2G all the way to 4G. In other words,
Wow.
if you open your Nokia today, it actually still works, despite the fact that there are so few people who are using it, So you need to always retire some infrastructure so that you can have more capacity to invest in the new infrastructure.
Well,
the issue of spectrum is very, very important in order to deal with issues of digital divide, and then we can deal with issues of data.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, and this is a discussion that is really critical to our country and the future of our kids, and we hope that we will be able to traverse this ground with you again. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really been an honor and a privilege to have you here with us this evening. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Now let's take a short break. Well, welcome back as we discuss the issue of critical skills to navigate the post-COVID economy. On Skype, I am now joined by an education economist, Martin Gustafsson, and also from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, its senior economist, Mr. Falu Fali. And let's start with the OECD. Mr. Fali, can you please correct me in pronouncing your name? And I apologize.
It's fine. It's Mr. Fal, like fall.
As in fall. Fal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
What is the recommendation to member countries like us of the OECD, member countries that have struggled historically with mathematics education, countries like us who've got an inequality gap as well as an apartheid backlog in education. How do you see us bridging these gaps and these big chasms?
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the question. And I think one need to accept that education, seeing the changes in education, it takes time. It's not something that you will do overnight and you have the results, because you take cohorts through the education system and it takes 12 years to get them out of primary and secondary educations, and then something around 3 or 5 more years through tertiary education.
Yes.
So you see that then it takes a long time before you have a full cohort into the new system that goes completely through the system. And that's the first thing. The second thing is impact of the education system on students depends also on the impact of the environment, and like having parents that went through education, through secondary and higher education, that are able to help you when you come back at home, increases the impact of the education system on students. So that means that also you need 1-2 generations to see the full impact of the education system coming through. That means that for South Africa, given the apartheid legacy, it is more or less normal that it takes time to improve the level of the whole population. That's the first general answer. And coming more precisely to math, there are two things. First, getting people the earlier possible into the education system, so pre-primary school, primary school, and then tailoring education and mathematical teaching so that it speaks to young students. And it's very important to not get quickly to abstract mathematics, but to make it more concrete so that the youth and the kids understand and think through what you are teaching them.
Yes.
That is very, very important.
Our country has an economy that needs to be revived on an urgent basis. We have taken a big hammering and we've experienced a big economic contraction from COVID-19. And we already going into COVID-19 had a backlog in critical skills and a skills mismatch between the skills that our education system is producing and those needed by the economy. So clearly we need to do something very fast. And what are the fast track strategies that you would recommend as the OECD to a country like ours?
Yes, I think we've said, and it's more than actual now under this current system, that South Africa needs to be more open to skilled workers so that you can have skilled workers.
So we should import skilled labor.
Yes, import skilled laborers. Let me say this in words: have more skilled migration.
Right.
What you need is skilled migration. I know that migration is not very popular in South Africa.
Yes, we have to bridge that. We have to
put it frankly. And when you are an economy that is biased toward skilled labor,
yes,
you need engineers, you need finance, insurance people, many professional workers with very specific skills, and your system is not producing enough of it. You know, you only have like 7% of a cohort that is reaching tertiary education.
Indeed. Can I bring in Martin Gustafsson at this point to jump in here in this discussion? You've been following what we've been talking about. What's your take?
Good evening, Thandeka, and your viewers.
Good evening.
Good evening. Palilo is right in emphasizing what a kind of slow process, unfortunately, educational improvement is. And what I think is insufficiently understood is that in South Africa, we have been improving for about 20 years, and it may not be something that's, strikes you in the eyes, because this improvement is rather slow. It's not very easy to observe. It is observed in the monitoring systems that we do have, including the international testing systems that we participate in. And we need to ensure that this trend continues, and it's not going to continue automatically.
I understand that we've done well on access, but we've done poorly on quality and the content of the education.
We do rather well when it comes to access at the schooling level. When it comes to access at the post-schooling level, we're still very weak. But actually, I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but quality has been improving. And it's been improving for about 20 years, and it's been improving relatively quickly. It's not fast, but by international standards, it's a decent speed of improvement.
Now, see, has it been improving in particular subjects? Has it been improving in particular subjects?
Okay, I mean, a lot of people react to this, but is this really happening? The international testing systems, focusing, for instance, on grade 4 reading, on grade 9 into mathematics.
Yes.
And these are extremely important programs that the OECD would agree we need to use for planning. These show that we have been improving. For example, in our current grade 4 children read about as well as grade 5 children did about 6 years previously. Now, that's quite a significant improvement, and it's going to pay off in future, and we need to stick to that kind of trajectory of improvement, but at the same time accept it's not automatic. And I think there's certain innovations that we have to make in order to make sure that we continue improving.
Well, that's all we have time for this evening. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and thank you for sharing your insights. Well, that's all we have time for this evening. From me, Thandeka Grobelembeki, and the whole team at Economics Unbound, it's good night.